I'm Roxana Rafacha, the founder of Conscious.Enterprises, and today's conversation is with Michael Ventura. This conversation could have been much, much longer. There were so many questions and rabbit holes I could have gone down. Michael Ventura is just such a fascinating human being. Best known as the founder of Sub Rosa, which is a strategy and design firm that serves a multitude of Fortune 500 companies as well as progressive startups. Michael has developed a program to educate corporations and society on the importance of empathy, and this program is called Applied Empathy. Michael has grown Applied Empathy into a movement, hosting client seminars, a podcast, a live event series, an immersive card game that everyone should check out on his website, and he even taught a course at Princeton University, as well as authored a book called Applied Empathy that every business person should read. I think it's also available on his website as well as Amazon. And from this approach, Michael has fostered many expressions of himself through business. Not only does he run his firm Sub Rosa and Applied Empathy, but he also has an alternative medicine practice called Corvus. He has an event space in New York City called And also a retail store with his wife called Calliope. Such a fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoy, and please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, and we're also on Facebook. And of course, our website is www.Conscious.Enterprises. Enjoy. So Michael Ventura, thank you for being a part of Conscious.Enterprises.
My pleasure.
It's so nice to be here in this awesome office of yours. I had no idea how big it was.
And sun-drenched.
Yes, sun-drenched today. Yeah, it's like a little warm actually. So you are best known as the founder of Sub Rosa, which is a branding and strategy firm here in the West Village. Tell me about Sub Rosa and what you guys do.
Sure. So I think at our core, what we're best at is helping brands discover or rediscover their north, right? Who are we? What do we stand for? Where are we going? How will we get there? What are the types of people we need inside this organization? What are the types of belief systems we need? So a lot of our work sits pre-marketing, if you will, and at sort of at the business level, really helping leaders think about those types of big questions. And then once we help crack that code and figure out what the path forward is, then inevitably it ends up moving downstream into designing graphics design systems or brand identity systems or communications programs or something maybe even as specific as a retail environment.
Cool.
So we have architects on staff and all of that sort of stuff. So sometimes it shows up really physical, sometimes it shows up more digital, or sometimes it just shows up strategically.
Is that what you guys did for Goop? I saw that you did something.
Goop, we did the Goop sort of one-day summit, if you will. So about 500 attendees. We produced the whole event for them, where there's speakers who are on stage. There's brands who are selling their wares to the attendees. There's a bunch of experiences. So executive producing that whole event on their behalf was our project for them recently.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, it looked amazing.
Yeah, it was. It was super cool.
Who are some of your other big name clients that people would recognize?
Yeah, Nike is a client we've been working with for a long time, really helping them across a variety of both strategic and marketing initiatives. Right now we're doing a lot of work with Marriott. Marriott, wow. Yeah, Marriott and Starwood merged last year, maybe 18 months ago now. So we're doing a lot of culture work to help bring those two enormous hospitality businesses together under one roof. In the next year or so, they will have as much as 1 million employees globally. Oh, wow. So how do you build a culture for 1 million people who probably will never meet each other, right? So how does culture transcend borders and languages and all of that sort of stuff? So it's a super interesting project. And then, let's see, all the usual suspects have come in and out of the doors over the years. So General Electric and Google and Target and, all sorts of, multinationals. We also, for a long while, worked with the Obama administration, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, we had about 2 years of work with them.
Wow.
We are not active with the current administration.
Good to know. Very cool. Yeah. And when did you start Sub Rosa? Like what year?
Sub Rosa as a brand began in 2009.
Okay, 2009.
From 2000 2003 to 2009, it was a different company, but same, the germ of what Sub Rosa would grow into essentially, and that was called Seed. So I started that in 2003 with a couple partners, and then in 2008 we decided to sort of dissolve the partnership, and Seed became Sub Rosa, and I continued running the business, and the partners kind of went their separate ways and did their next chapters.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so you've grown it to how many employees do you have now?
We're about 45, 50 people at any given time. That's kind of where we've been for a while. I feel like that size kind of works for us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how do you, I mean, it seems like you work a lot on other people's cultures. How do you instill your own corporate culture here?
About 3 years ago, we made a commitment to be our own best client, which is hard when you're a services business and you're always focused on everyone else's work. So we do a couple things. We have a pretty regular cadence of communication, be that a weekly team-wide meeting or a series of other weekly meetings that are just very reliably set, and where you're going to have an opportunity to sit with certain people and have a good conversation. But beyond that, something we've instituted, we refer to just colloquially as Sub Rosa Day, but one day a month where we do no client work, where we only focus inwardly.
Cool.
So we'll do training and development work, we'll do updates to case studies or the website or things that sort of often get kind of moved to the back burner. And the reason for that was we said, if you can't give your own business 12 days a year, that seems really short-sighted.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure we at least dedicated that level of attention on a monthly basis to keeping up with our own best practices.
Awesome, that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
And you are obviously very entrepreneurial. I know you have other projects other than Sub Rosa. Tell me about those.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there are essentially two other businesses that I run in addition to Sub Rosa, but for me they all kind of ladder up to the same overarching idea, which is how do I use empathy to get out of my own shoes, look at the world from a different perspective, and provide a solution that will ultimately help someone. So as we've just said, for Sub Rosa, that's pretty obvious how that works. Since 2010, I've also run a alternative medicine practice where I treat, in a busy week, somewhere between 15 and 20 people a week in private practice. That's pretty normal, like 15 is pretty normal, 20 would be a little busy.
Yeah.
And the ailments that someone walks in the door with are quite varied. Sometimes people will come in with low back pain or insomnia, or they're trying to get pregnant or something like that. But sometimes people come in because they've just kind of lost their way or lost a connection to their inner voice and want to try to rediscover that. Or they're going through a really serious medical issue at the moment and they need to have a alternative practice to pair up with the Western practice in order to keep their immune system up or things like that. So people who are going through chemo or radiation or things like that, I often end up working with them in partnership with their Western doctors. So it's a really nice pairing. And I work in two forms. I work in a traditional form from Mexico, which is curanderos and curanderas are sort of the Mexican equivalent of shaman, essentially. So it's a very indigenous, very sacred traditional practice. So I do that, and then I also work in Chinese medicine in a form called Qigong.
How did you learn these?
I trained with my curandera in Mexico,
okay.
and her lineage and her tradition was passed on to me, which I'm very grateful for, because traditionally it only gets passed to the curandera's granddaughter. It's a feminine tradition that has gone down through a feminine line.
Oh, wow.
And though I am not a Mexican granddaughter, she has taken a real liking to me over the years, and we have bonded in a way that she felt safe to pass her lineage on to me.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And then the Chinese medicine I got into because I was really broken. During my mid-20s, running this business was very stressful, and had herniated discs in my back, had insomnia, had substance abuse issues, had all kinds of crazy stuff. And ultimately what got me better was not medication or surgery, but it was meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, acupuncture. And so as those things got me better, I became more curious about them and ultimately trained in them myself.
Interesting.
So that's like a big second part of my life. And then the third bit, because there's not enough things on my plate, is my wife and I 3 years ago started a retail store called Calliope. which is
Okay.
also in this building. And it's a home goods and furnishings shop. And so,
Nice.
part of our gig is looking out into the world and seeing who's making beautiful stuff and who's
Yeah.
putting in the right intention into it and
Oh, cool.
sourcing things the right way and are finding ways to make a house a home,
Right.
right? And
Right.
then how can we be a clearinghouse for those things and sort of put them in a place for discovery. And so it's a small little shop,
Yeah.
but we've gained a really passionate following, and people seek us out because like they know they'll find something interesting there.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out for
Yeah.
my real estate clients too. So when you talked about in your 20s having this, these
Yeah.
troubles, these health issues, substance abuse, whatever, was this when you were starting Sub Rosa?
I had already started, Seed. I had already
Okay.
started it, and it was, so I started that when I was like 22, 23,
Mhm.
and then the issues started happening about 2 years later because
Okay.
I would walk in the door and I would see 35 people who have to pay rent,
Right.
35 people who have groceries to buy, 35
Right.
people who want to go on a date this weekend and pick up the tab, right?
Right.
And the stress of bringing in enough business to pay for all of those people and to make sure that they feel comfortable and secure and can do their job well sat on my shoulders, and I didn't know how to deal with that stress.
Yeah.
And so I would bury it with drugs and alcohol and all of these other things.
Yeah.
And then eventually one day I was changing the water jug and just like saw white, and the next thing I knew I opened my eyes and I was on the ground and the water jug is like glug glug glug
Oh my
pouring water on me.
God.
And I had herniated 3 discs in my lumbar spine and could barely walk.
Wow.
And it was just what in retrospect the way I view that injury was that I had piled so much emotional weight on me that at a certain point my body just said like
Just
enough is
gave out,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was a signal to change my life.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So did you find that at that point or after that point you changed kind of your intentions with the business, or do you think it was something that you kind of had to the intention was always the same and you shifted?
I had to
and
change.
worked around
I had to
it?
change my interior before I could change my exterior. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of what began after that was about self-work and
Right.
about taking care of this so that this can take care of others. And so that was it was like the wisdom of the airlines. I refer to it as sometimes like put your own mask on before helping others, right?
Yeah,
Like it was sort of
yeah.
like that lesson proved out for me. It was really like work on me, and then once I felt good and stable and secure and knew how to
Yeah.
stand on my own 2 feet, I was able to help others.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I love that. What would you say was your biggest failure or mistake that you're now proud of? That at the time may have been such a devastating thing to your business, your personal life, whatever it was, but now has proved to be such a growing.
I mean, it's
rewarding
hard to pick
experience.
one. I think, for me, there have been so many, honestly, because, this is all I've ever done, right? This is the only job I've ever had. I've been doing this for 16 years, maybe a little bit more. And so all of my professional mistakes sit inside one company, and
Interesting.
which is kind of like a weird thing. Not a lot
Yeah.
of people have like a singular container that all of their fuck ups sit inside of.
Right.
But for me, that's sort of the way it goes. So, there have been ways I've poorly managed hiring and firing people.
Okay.
There have been ways I have poorly managed relationships with clients. There have been ways I've poorly managed my own time, and so it's hard to point to one because I feel like there's this spirit of continual improvement that I've kind of embraced over the years, because if you put things off long enough, you make big mistakes. But if you pay attention enough, you make small mistakes, and those small mistakes can be course corrected before they become big mistakes, right? So
That's a good way
I feel like I make a lot of small mistakes,
Okay.
but I try to prevent big ones from occurring.
That's all you can ask for, I
Yeah.
guess, most of the time, right? And what was the original inspiration for you starting this company?
Well, myself and my business partner at the time, we were both in our early 20s, and it was an era where brands were really starting to pay attention to digital
Okay.
and having a perspective on what their online presence should be like or look like. And so for a lot of people, it was the first time brands were really thinking about how do we behave like a human being, because
Right.
up until then they made a ad and put it on TV, or they made a billboard and they put it on a billboard, or whatever.
Right.
But it was
What
all
year
one
is this
direction.
around?
It's 2003.
Early 2000. Okay.
Right. So now this is the first time where like comments are going to exist on a website. People can actually write in something, or that a brand is going to live digitally in a channel that has two-way dialogue, like Facebook, or then MySpace and stuff like
Right.
that. Right. So we started to think about helping. We started to realize that brands needed help behaving more like people.
Mm-hmm.
Like when a brand has to actually respond to your comment, they had a lot of questions. They were like, well, how do we respond? Who's responding? Who from this organization is going to actually do that?
Right.
And what's the tone of voice? And are we going to be apologetic? Are we going to be, sure of our comment? Like there was all of this like stuff that we as humans learn from the moment we're this big. Like how do you behave and interact with people that brands had never done?
Right.
And so the impetus for really starting it was to help brands learn how to behave more like people, and that has
Very
evolved through empathy.
And so that brings me to my next question, which is about applied empathy,
Yeah.
which is a big program, I guess you would call
Yep.
it, that you guys run and apply to a lot of your clients.
Mhm.
Tell me about that, and tell me about
Sure.
how I know you do panel discussions about it, and
Yeah.
you've branched off and
So
did
we,
something.
about 4 years ago, said we need to kind of declare a major, right? And like
Okay.
stand for something that we really do care about and that we do well. And after looking back over a body of work that we had developed over a decade plus, we started to see this theme of empathy emerge about when we're doing our best work, we actually get out of our own shoes and we sort of think about problems from a different perspective, and we can feel and sense how others are perceiving something, and in so doing, we're able to create a better solution.
Okay.
And so we said, if that's our thing, let's commit to it. Let's not just like put it in a slide deck and make it a nice buzzword. Let's actually make it a thing that we care about and stand for. And so we began by building a just 1 hour lecture that I started to give, and I was invited to go down to Princeton and give it at Princeton to a bunch of the undergrads.
Oh, wow.
And in doing that, afterwards, one of the deans from the university came up to me and said, I really like what you have to say. Would you be interested in creating a curriculum and teaching a class here about this? And we said, sure. And so collectively, a group of us here built a 12-week curriculum, started teaching it down there. That led to a podcast that we've been doing for over 2 years, and a live event series that we do every month. It led to the development of a whole host of week-long, 2-day, 1-day, half-day seminars that we run for clients, and then most recently, the authoring of a book called Applied Empathy,
Right.
which will be out in May, out in the world.
Oh, great. I'll have to get
Yeah.
the links for that. Very cool. I didn't realize you did a podcast too.
Yeah, so we record this monthly panel that we do
Okay.
for a podcast. So it's a live
Got
live
it.
audience,
And then you make it a
we push
podcast.
it to a podcast.
Awesome. Love that. Why do you consider your business to be a conscious enterprise, and what kind of higher purpose do you think you serve in everything that you do?
I mean, I think there's an inward and an outward way of answering that. Inwardly, I think what we try to do with our team is to have everyone be aware enough of themselves and who they are and what they're working on, and acknowledge and very much sort of broadcast, even in our sort of our own brand book for Sub Rosa, that we admit and embrace the fact that we are a work in progress, right?
Cool.
And so I think part of being aware of yourself and conscious is knowing that that it is a journey, and that we're constantly learning, and that we're constantly improving. And if we're aware of that, there is no finish line. It's a process we go through.
Right.
And so collectively, we all kind of work together. And I know if someone's working on something, if I can be helpful to them, I'm going to do so, because it'll help get them where they need to go.
Right.
And I'll probably learn something along the way too. But then on a more macro level, on a more external facing level, some people might look at some of the companies we work with and take issue with them because of some practice they might have. In the past, Nike had been dragged through the press for its labor practices in Asia, and General Electric has had bad press around their oil and gas business or things like that, right? But for us, that's the point of the work we're doing, is if we can go into organizations that have challenges, that are trying to play on a global scale or are playing on a global scale and doing really great work in some fields, can we help them improve some of the areas where they're not doing so well? You know, if you can make a company that's doing something that doesn't feel right behave better,
Right.
that's almost better than, you know, working with well, we would say no, but like, you know, then working with the Patagonias of the world who are already doing so much right. You know, like go where the problems are, don't go where the best examples are. Though,
That's
like,
really great.
You know,
Yeah.
though, like I said, like if Patagonia calls tomorrow, we'd be happy to take the call.
Right. Very cool. What do you think you do to, when you talk about going in, you make sure that everyone who works here looks inward.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the techniques that you use to
So,
instill that in your employees?
one of the things that we do is, you know, we have a fairly regular cadence of personal reflection and renewal time. So, you know, you'll do a self-assessment a couple times a year. You'll be assessed by your colleagues a couple times a year. You'll have sit-downs to really have a dialogue and a way to exchange that information so that you can understand what you're doing well, where you have opportunities for growth. But then beyond that, we do 2 major day-long either offsites or onsites here every year where we will bring in different types of programming or thinking that will let you explore your interior world in a different way, be that in the form of meditation or some other tradition, or maybe just a journaling exercise, or something like how we met in part, which was through the use of those cards, right? So we developed, just for the context of the interview, you know, the questions and empathy cards are essentially like highbrow cards against humanity. You know, instead of like dirty jokes, we're asking deep questions. But doing that with a colleague that you might have been working with for 2 years and spending 20 minutes doing that, you're going to know more about that person in 20 minutes.
So you guys utilize those cards there usually. Okay, cool. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do you yourself have like a regular like morning ritual or anything you do to like keep yourself like aligned? What do you do?
Yeah, for sure. I have a Taoist practice, so typically I'll get up and I have about an hour of Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, and then if I'm feeling extra stiff or like, you know, just off a plane, I'll throw in some Yin Yoga as well. But that's every morning, 7 days a week for the past 5 years. Like, you know, like don't miss a day if you know. And then after that, I'll usually get dressed, and then I see a client for my alternative medicine practice. Starting at 8 a.m.
Oh, wow.
So I go from 8 to 9 with a client, and then by 9:15 I'm in Sub Rosa, go for the rest of the day, and then see another client at 6:15. So those 2 treatments at the beginning and the end of the day really bookend my day.
Okay.
And give me an opportunity to be wholly present with one other person, because when I'm at Sub Rosa and we're sitting in this room or a room like this, clients aren't paying us for the present moment. They're paying us for what we're going to do together.
What you're delivering,
and what will happen next, right? So there isn't a lot of value placed on the now in the commercial world that we live in.
Right.
But in a treatment, that's all we have, because I can't help what happened before you come in, nor can I help what happens at 9:01 when you walk out the door.
Right.
So all I can do is be of service in that 60 minutes that we have together. And so it's a nice way to bookend the day, being wholly present with another person.
Wow, packed schedule, cool. How do you, I mean, you have so much going on, so many fun things. How do you measure success?
I would say by how comfortably I sleep.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm going to bed without anxiety, without my motor running, then I'm probably doing the right thing.
Cool.
You know, money is a side effect of doing what you love. I've never really thought that money is the driver. Impact, some people will say quantity is more important than quality. Some people will say quality is more important than quantity. I think that depends on what the problem is and what you're trying to change.
Yeah.
So for me, it really is like, you know, do I feel good about what I'm doing, and am I comfortable enough when I lay my head down at the end of the night to know that I did a good piece of work for that day?
Cool. So would you consider yourself to be a successful person today?
Yeah, for sure. I successful with a lot of room to grow.
Awesome. Yeah. And on the point of money, it's interesting to talk to entrepreneurs about, you know, attracting the right money. When you were going through the beginning of Sub Rosa, and when you're talking about having this weight on your shoulders of, people need to get paid and this
Right.
and that, did you find that there was something like either a turning point, a realization, a catalyst for you that allowed money to kind of start flowing to you more naturally?
I think money doesn't find you until you value yourself. And I had a teacher, my qigong master was talking to me about as I began practicing. In the beginning, I didn't want to charge because I didn't feel I was at a state of learning enough where I could. So I had proposed that I would just do this exchange, right? Because it's what was most meaningful was that you were to give and receive, and I was to give and receive. But if you brought me, a pie from the farmer's market, that would be fine. You didn't have to pay me in money. And I had been doing that for a little while, and he told me that at the end of the day, there has to be a value you put on your time, and there has to be a value you value your work at.
Right.
Otherwise, people will set the value for it. For
Right.
you. And that's true in any business, right? If you don't value your time and value who you are and the work you provide to them, someone else is going to value it for you. And there's a very high likelihood they will value it less than you would value yourself.
Yeah.
So, don't be afraid to know what you're worth or declare what you're worth to other people, because that sort of puts the right vibration in the air for things to come to you and find you.
Totally. Love that. What are your goals, I'd say, in the next year, 2 years, for all these endeavors that you're working on?
I have a colleague here who says he has a good analogy for it, where he, in the development of like physical prowess, I guess, for lack of a better word, there's a period where you build bulk and a period where you build definition.
Okay.
Right? And like you can't define your strength until you put the mass on first, right?
Right.
We've done mass,
Yeah.
right? And so really my job in the next few years for the work we do is about definition. It's about those like slight refinements. It's about, just like tightening every screw and making those adjustments. But granted, there may still be occasions where seismic change needs to occur. We may, amidst making those small modifications, discover, wow, that really isn't serving us,
right?
Or it's doing the wrong thing for this business, and to not be afraid to take action when those things occur or when they're discovered, right? And to say like, okay, you know what, this was good for us for a while, but we ultimately have to change that. So I guess it's when we say goals, like I don't have a 3-year horizon that at this point we're going to be this and doing this and It's more a daily practice of refinement towards growth and team satisfaction.
Awesome. Great. What impact would you like to make on the world or the universe if you had unlimited resources?
Yeah, I think empathy cures a lot.
Yeah.
If we could make the world a more empathic place, I think we would see a lot of the other changes I would like to see in the world. People wouldn't be depleting natural resources at the same rate. Indigenous communities would be protected and thriving.
Yeah.
The societal crises that we in this country are going through right now, from Black Lives Matter to Me Too to gun control to everything else, would have a different perspective if we could just see and convince others to see each other's angles and meet in the middle and refine a bit more.
Yeah.
So for me, I've elected that empathy is going to be my path into that, and by virtue of that, collectively our path into that. So that's really where we're putting our focus.
Beautiful. What's a valuable piece of advice? What is a valuable piece of advice that you'd like to give other entrepreneurs that are creating businesses with conscious intentions?
One of the early pieces of advice I got, which is true, I think, for not just entrepreneurs, but also just humans, is to start to really find the comfort in the discomfort, right? The way it was phrased to me, which I've sort of evolved in my mind over the years, is if you don't get into trouble, you'll never learn how to get out of it, right? And so if you always play it safe, and if you always kind of, just do the easy thing, you're not creating any tension for growth. You're not creating any opportunity for expansion. So don't be afraid to take the hard risk or the overwhelming thing or the risky thing, because that's where real growth occurs. That's where you're pushing your boundaries and ultimately will find something more meaningful.
Okay, cool. Is there anything you wanted me to ask you or you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up?
No, you covered a lot of good ground.
Okay,
That went
cool.
fast, but that was really good.
Okay, cool. What's your astrological sign?
I am a Cancer Sun.
Okay.
I am a Sag Moon, and I'm a Scorpio Rising.
Really?
Yeah.
I would not have pegged that. Okay, cool. The intensity, cool.
Yeah, it's there. It's
It
just
is
kind
there,
of like
yeah.
tucked in corners.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
doing this. It's been so great to hear your story. And yeah, maybe we'll do this again in a year or 6 months.
See where
and
we're at from
you're
there.
at. Yeah, this was really great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome.